Hi, everybody. Welcome to Big Joe's Journal. We're the end of January 2021, and we're going through well, I guess you'd call it the annual cold snap. This is the coldest time of the year, January, February. And while it is mighty cold now, we've had it colder. We've gone through periods where the high temperature has been zero. I remember a few years ago that I think we went something like 17, 18 days when the temperature never went up above zero. But this is cold enough the way it is right now, and apparently this cold weather is going to hang in for a little while. Well, along with the cold weather, this COVID-19, of course, has taken its toll. Over 100 Vermonters have died because of it. And the toll seems to be mounting. I think probably it's because of, well, I can't really say ball games or hockey games, but the UVM girls basketball team has suspended the rest of their season. I think one or two of them may have tested positive for COVID-19. Of course, the college kids now are coming back, those that are going to try and reside on campus for the second semester. And they have to be, they have to be checked at home before they come into Vermont. UVM is setting up a 2-week quarantine. For all the students that come back, they're going to live on campus. They're going to be quarantined for a couple of weeks, and then they're going to be getting into the second semester. And of course, this is a problem in education. I see Fairhaven schools are going to continue to do everything by remote, use Zoom for those that have it. Those that don't are just plain out of luck. But this is something that, when we get this thing under control, education is something we're going to have to look at. Of course, on the good side, we have a new president, and we have a new vice president. We have an administration that is probably the most diverse administration in the history of the country. It includes a representative of just about every inkling or social norm in society that we can find. We have our first African American, who is the Secretary of, going to be the Secretary of Defense. We have a Native American who's going to be the Secretary of the Interior. We have our first female vice president, and she's not only our first female vice president, but her husband is the first second gentleman. Her husband is going to be teaching law at Georgetown University, while his wife is helping President Biden run the country. And Joe Biden, well, he went into office and he hit the floor running. He signed a number of executive orders undoing the damage that Trump has done. For example, we're back in the Paris Accords. We're going to be getting back into the treaty with Iran, to join some of our allies in the treaty with Iran. He wants to renegotiate treaty with Russia, ban on nuclear weapons, which is set to expire and under Trump would have expired. He wants to renegotiate that for another 5 years. The one black mark seems to be coming out of New Mexico, where he's banned drilling on federal land for natural gas and in the state of New Mexico for a period of 60 days. And apparently the companies that have been drilling down there on federal land, they've made a pretty good profit on the deal. And they are complaining about that. And the stock market seems to be leveling off. Janet Yellen, who was the chair of the Federal Reserve Commission for a number of years, our new Secretary of the Treasury, a woman that knows finance inside and out, well, there are shades of just about every section of the country as President Biden seeks to begin his mission to bring the country back together again. After being torn apart under his predecessor, he wants to unite us. In other words, His campaign, he said he wanted to be president of the United States. Not just the blue states, but the United States of America. And I think he's going to do that. He's going to have his hands full. But I think Joe Biden will be a one-term president. And he'll get the country back again, get it back on its feet, get it organized, get our economy going. And then in 2024, the lady who's now our vice president, I do believe she will run for the office of president. I think she'll be elected. The 45th president, well, he's still going to be in the news. Beginning February 8th, he has another impeachment trial before the Senate. And is he going to be convicted? I don't think so, because they're going to have 67 senators to vote to convict. What he's being tried for, or being impeached this time, is for instigating the insurrection that took place on January 6th at the Capitol in Washington, when he encouraged his followers, he and his crackpot lawyer there, Rudy Giuliani, encouraged their followers to go on up to the Capitol building and do what you have to do. And boy, they did. They went in there. Many of the nuts that were up there were armed. 5 people lost their lives in that riot. And of course, Trump, naturally, he won't go himself because he doesn't want to get hurt. You know, as I've said many times, he's as yellow as his hair. But he went back in the White House and let his goons and their stupid followers go up there and do all kinds of damage. What they're trying to do is to stop the Congress from certifying the Electoral College victory of Joe Biden. And of course, as you know, Trump became very desperate. He tried to talk the Secretary of State of Georgia to overturning or finding, right, go out in the cemetery maybe, and finding enough votes to overturn Joe Biden's carrying of the state of Georgia. And of course, you know, he tried all kinds of courts, was turned down, kept claiming it was a false election, it was rigged and all that. Every challenge in court, including his big challenge before the Supreme Court, was turned down. There was no sufficient evidence that there was any violation or any corruption in this past election. And of course, the big blow in Georgia was when Georgia, for the first time, dumped 2 Republican senators and elected 2 Democrats, which balances the Senate off at 50-50. And of course, Vice President Harris will have the deciding vote, which swings the Senate just barely into the Democratic column. But the former president, he's going to be more or less tried before the Senate. I believe it's on insurrection. In other words, encouraging an attempt to overthrow the government, impede the process of certifying the election of a legally elected administration. And I want to say something about the former Vice President, Mike Pence. You know, Mike Pence was a good congressman and a good governor, and why he ever agreed to be Trump's running mate is beyond me. But in the 4 years that he was there, he became a bootlicker and pretty much of a suck-up to Trump. Everything went on under President Trump's leadership, blah, 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 all the rest of this. When the push came to shove, on January 6th, he was fulfilling his constitutional duty of presiding over the certification of the Electoral College votes. And of course, Trump called him into his office and wanted him to take some of these votes, especially Pennsylvania, you know, the Keystone states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I think Nevada and Arizona, and just sort of throw them in the wastebasket and see if he couldn't swing the Electoral College vote to Trump. Well, Mike Pence had to make a decision. Does he continue to serve this idiot in the White House, or does he adhere to the Constitution? And he adhered to the Constitution. He finds some backbone. He stood up And he did his constitutional duty, as required by the Constitution. And he presided over the certification of the Electoral College vote, even though it was done early in the morning on the, actually the 7th of January. They started on the 6th, but then the riots took place. Some of Trump's followers wanted to hang the vice president. But in this turnover, in the last month or so, Mike Pence regained his credibility. The way he stood up to Trump and the way he fulfilled his constitutional duty, he restored his credibility as a reliable, honest politician. And you know, the defeat of Trump, it's not only a plus for the country, it's a huge plus for the country and for the rest of the free world. Now Mr. Putin doesn't have his puppet in the White House anymore. And he's not going to have with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris there, and if she takes over, Joe Biden will be a gentleman, and he'll deal with Putin as he has to, and little chop there from North Korea, and a few of the other goons around the world are Trump's buddies. I think Kamala Harris, I think she'll bloody their nose a little bit. She's more of a fighter than Joe. Joe's more of a conciliator, bringing people together. Kamala will be more of a fired-up leader. And, you know, I said a long time ago, if Joe Biden picks Kamala Harris for his running mate, he's got the election. And he had the wisdom to do that. And I think he made up his mind in that first Democratic so-called debate when she stood up to him on his vote on busing. And I think he saw in her, he saw a fighter. And he knew that this was going to be a dirty campaign, because Trump doesn't know how to win fairly or squarely, but he knows how to play dirty. And he needed a running mate who would be fired up, who not only could take it, but could dish it out. And I think he decided right there, if I'm the nominee, she's going to be my running mate. And of course, when he got the nomination and looking for a running mate, he announced, first of all, it was going to be a woman. And then he announced it was going to be a woman of color. And there were at least 4 standout candidates. One was the current mayor of Atlanta. And another one, a lady from Georgia who almost was elected governor of Georgia last time out, Stacey Fellows. Would have been good running mates, but I think he made the right choice in picking Kamala Harris. He picked a fighter. And of course, her first duty, and she started on the day she was inaugurated, by swearing in 3 new senators, 2 from Georgia, and her successor from the state of California. The gentleman was also her successor as Attorney General out there when she ran for the U.S. Senate. And now he's succeeding her in the Senate seat that she had to vacate when she became vice president. And her husband, for the first time in the country, we have a second gentleman. First gentleman, of course, is the president. That's Joe Biden. And his wife, Jill, Dr. Jill Biden, being second lady for 8 years, and she's going to be a very, very gracious first lady. She also intends to continue teaching her class at a high school in Wilmington. Now, whether she'll be able to do that or not remains to be seen. That's going to be a rather tricky thing for the Secret Service, which has to provide her with security. But I believe as First Lady, her big thing is going to be education. And we have a First Lady who is going to be a big improvement over the last one. Melania Trump, well, I think she did her best, but she well, she's more of a beauty queen. She wasn't really a standout first lady. Of course, she had an idiot for a husband, but that's beside the point now. Michelle Obama was a tremendous first lady. And of course, her predecessors, Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton as first lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt's wife, probably one of our most effective first ladies, politically speaking. Bess Truman was more or less laid back. Mamie Eisenhower, pretty much. Pat Nixon, well, Pat was, she was a good first lady. She had to put up with an awful lot, including the Watergate scandal and all the rest of it. And then, of course, you know, we had Hillary Clinton, who was probably smarter than her husband to begin with. And of course, you know, you had the Clintons' marital problems, everything else for 8 years. We had George and Laura Bush. And then Barack Obama, and his wife Michelle, who was, in my opinion, was one of our great first ladies. Then we came down to number 45, which, well, was a dip in the road, both in the White House and as first lady. But now the country has come back, is on the way back. Big thing, of course, you know, is COVID-19. And now I understand one of the companies that was making a virus, or making, well, the word escapes me right now, but anyway, the shots that is supposed to control this virus has withdrawn because the product that they were producing wasn't getting the results that they'd hoped for. So we'll see what happens there. I'm one of that group that's 75 and over, quite a bit over 75. And, well, we'll see. When the shot's available, I certainly am going to get it. Because I think the only way I've avoided it is by pretty well staying quarantined since March. In my house, it's just my dog Eve and I. And the only visitor I have a cleaning lady, comes in once a month. The grocery lady comes in for about half an hour every week. And I have a nephew that comes and visits me off and on, and that's it. And we're using every precaution, you know, using this face mask and all the rest of it to stay healthy. Well, the political news, of course, February 8th. The Senate begins the impeachment hearings on Donald Trump. He's going to be tried on promoting and encouraging an insurrection. In other words, to try to overthrow the government, which is what he did, what he tried. And this is certainly borders very close on treason. And it gets pretty bad when it's the President of the United States that is encouraging this overthrow of the government. And what was behind it? Well, I think Mr. Trump, and I've said all along, had visions of himself being another Adolf Hitler. And he wanted to be president for life. He wanted to be a dictator. And of course, he had his goons, you know, the Proud Boys and the neo-Nazis, and a few of his other crackpot buddies who were a problem, are a problem, and will continue to be a problem. And unfortunately, we have a number of them right here in Vermont. You know, you had 51 people from Vermont take a bus trip to Washington, participate in this attempt to overthrow the government. 51 out of our state of Vermont. It's hard to believe that there'd be 51 people who would be that stupid. And another thing that I was very disappointed in The Board of Aldermen. I spent 10 years on the Board of Aldermen here in the city of Rutland. And they decided not to condemn this attempt to overthrow the federal government. It took place in Washington, encouraged by the president, planned by the president, no doubt about that. It was well organized. And I think as they follow this organizational chain right up through, you're going to find out it's going to land in the Oval Office when Donald Trump was occupying it. So he's going to be impeached on insurrection. And I think I don't think he'll be convicted. I don't think, besides the 50 Democrats, they have to have 17 Republicans. You got to have 67. It's got to be 3/4 to convict. And they may get 10, hopefully more. But there's still some Republicans that are a little afraid of Trump. They see Trump's crowd. And if they have ideas of maybe running for the presidency, they don't want to alienate Trump's crowd. So there's still that fear in there. But I think they might get maybe about 10 or 11, maybe even 12 Republican senators to vote. But you got to have the 67. The Constitution says 67. The Constitution says 3/4. So, or wait, no, two-thirds. And I don't think they're going to come up with that. So once again, he will be acquitted. But his problems with the court system are only beginning. Somewhere down the line, as this investigation into the attempt to overthrow the government goes deeper and deeper, he's going to be very, very definitely involved. And I think they're going to find that, as Watergate was encouraged by the Nixon White House, this was obviously encouraged by the Trump White House. And he may, somewhere down the line, have to stand charged on treason. He's definitely going to be going to court over his income taxes. He's not going to have his goons around to protect him and shelter him anymore. And so I think the federal court of in New York that is very interested in looking at his tax returns. And I think when they get their hands on them and go through them, that Mr. Trump's going to be making a court appearance. Hopefully he's going to be smart enough to get an attorney other than Rudy Giuliani. I've said before, Giuliani is nuttier than a bed bug with fleas. But get a lawyer get a competent legal staff. The legal staff that defended him in his last impeachment hearing have all bailed out on him. They don't want to be any part of it. So I think he's going to have trouble getting legal counsel. Very few attorneys want to be involved in a case where maybe you're talking about treason. And this could very well be a trial of Mr. Trump on treason. The last time we had a person in the administration involved in an insurrection attempt was way back in 1801. In the election of 1800, when we started off, in electing a president, vice president, you usually had about 4 or 5, maybe 6 people running. And the one with the most votes became president. The one that finished second became vice president. Well, in 1800, in that election, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied. It was a dead heat. And so, of course, the election went into the House of Representatives. And Alexander Hamilton from New York, who was politically distant from Jefferson, looked at the two guys and they said, well, Jefferson's the better man for the job. And he supported Jefferson. And remnants of the Federalist Party at that time joined with Democrats, and Jefferson was elected as our third president, making Aaron Burr our vice president. Well, of course, Mr. Burr challenged Alexander Hamilton to a duel, and in the process of the duel, of course, he killed him. And he also advocated an overthrow of the young government. Well, the result was that he had to flee. A warrant was issued for his arrest. And so he had to flee the territory of the United States at that time. He went to New Orleans. And New Orleans at that particular time, of course, was under the control of the French. Napoleon had defeated Spain and put his brother on the throne in Spain, and Spanish lands over here were transferred from the colonies of Spain to colonies of France. And it's from there, of course, that the United States negotiated the Louisiana Purchase, which was the biggest land swindle probably in the history of the world. But Aaron Burr fled the jurisdiction of the United States and went down to New Orleans. Well, as a result of this, Congress said, we've got to set up a different system. And so in 1804, they passed the 12th Amendment to the Constitution that set up the system that we have now of electing our president and vice president. In other words, instead of top vote getter president, number 2 vice president, they set up where you had to run for this specific office. In other words, you had so many men running for president, or women, of course, but women in those days didn't have the right to vote or hold property. And you had to have a separate tier of running for vice president. In other words, a guy couldn't run for president, come in second, and become vice president anymore. And the result was you had your political party setting up tickets. You candidate for president, you candidate for vice president. And Alexander Hamilton, of course, had instituted for the election of 1789, we'd put in the Electoral College. So back in 1804, when the country and the government passed the 12th Amendment, it set up the way we vote now. Through the mainly you have your popular vote and you have your Electoral College. And the one who comes in first is president, and then there's a separate office of vice president. And usually the president and vice president are a team. So, president gets so many electoral votes, he takes his vice president with him. The president, or the candidate for president, usually chooses whom he or she wants for a running mate. And of course that has been the case right on down through. The time it was contested was the Democratic Convention of 1956, when Adlai Stevenson, who had been hammered by Eisenhower in 52, ran again. And he left it up to the convention to pick his running mate. In 1952, he chose as his running mate Senator from Alabama, John Sparkman. And of course, the Eisenhower-Nixon ticket, because of Ike mainly, snowballed the Democrats. And the Republicans controlled the White House and Congress and everything else. Well, when Stevenson got the nomination again, he decided to let the convention choose his running mate. And it came down to 2 senators, Estes Kefauver of Tennessee and John Kennedy of Massachusetts. And on the third ballot, Kefauver had enough support to become Stevenson's running mate. And again, the same story, you know, Eisenhower, because of Eisenhower, not because of Nixon mainly, but because of Eisenhower, it was another, sweep for the Republicans. And it's just as well John Kennedy didn't get the nomination of vice president, because he was able to come back in 1960 much stronger and win the nomination himself. Well, with that, everybody stay warm, stay healthy. May Almighty God of infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. Thank God for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Have a great week. See you all next week.